Yo, what up, fam? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am very excited. We got episode number 31 of Collectin and Connectin, baby. Pushing the good vibes. I am King Brett. We got Mr. Glenn out there. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, the Cowboys fans, doing now?
Yeah, way to bring that up right away. I was going to try to be nice to you this episode. So anyways, Three Ball, how are you doing, buddy?
What up? I'm good. Shots fired, Glenn. Take it easy.
Yep. See how he didn't bring up that team at all? Saving the best for last as always. The man, the myth, the legend. Very excited. Dude, we got Jacob on the episode, Mr. Eisenberg himself. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. What's up, guys? Reggie
Jacob.
Miller episode number 31. Pretty exciting.
Let's go.
Yes, sir. Been dying to talk to you. So glad that you're here, man. Part of a Top Shot team. Been in the streets, working hard and making a product we all love, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk Top Shot, NBA. I know we got some Knicks talk coming up, so it's going to be a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, all these Knicks fans keep popping up on here since we added Glenn to the show, and now we're just talking Northeast basketball all the time.
We might have to rename the show, like Collecting and Connecting with Knicks fans or something.
Yikes. I just had nightmares.
Well, it's the same kind of players anyway, right? All the Mavs, Knicks, they share players anyway.
They do.
Jacob, we have a running joke of all the different name drop players that have gone between the Knicks and the Mavericks. We just trade them back and forth. We got some games going. There's a ton of them.
The Shane Larkin series, the Samuel Dallenbergs of the world.
See,
look at you going back. I love it.
Those are two good ones right there. I love it.
There. Donnell Harvey might be my favorite.
Oh,
get out of here.
That's a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. I think you picked so we do have a couple regular segments that we will bring up on the show. We got Sticky Icky Wiki, as always, where we break down something we found on Wikipedia while researching for the show. Name that player, which is a fun one. And it sounds like we got some great players picked today to test your Knicks fandom. And based on the name drops you've already said, I think that'll be fun. That Glenn made it a little tougher for you, so I'm excited.
After those name drops, I think he's going to get them very easily. I think
it's going to be pretty smooth. I wasn't too worried about him for sure.
And I'm over here Googling who those people are. I don't even know. Like, do they play basketball or are they football players?
And then we'll finish up with favorite basketball memory. But I imagine that we'll talk lots of different basketball memories throughout the show. So very glad to have you, Jacob. I guess we'll start with something fun. Heisenberg from Breaking Bad or Jesse Eisenberg, which comes up more?
Well, so my dad's first name starts with an H, so his email my entire childhood was Heisenberg.
Nice. Wow.
So it became super popularized. But Jesse Eisenberg definitely comes up more often. And I actually have a cousin named Jesse Eisenberg that is not the actor. So
wow. That would be wild news if it was the actor, but still very cool to have his namesake for sure. We've brought Zombieland up a couple times and a couple rules from that, and definitely talked about Breaking Bad on the show as well. So two previous references.
Absolutely. Yeah, Breaking Bad's an all-timer. I actually was a bigger fan of Adventureland than Zombieland. I don't know if you guys have seen both.
Yeah.
About the amusement park, right, where they're working.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely seen it. Good flick for sure.
Yep. Social Network's definitely number one for Jesse Eisenberg films, though, I have to say.
Yeah, the start of Facebook, what a really cool story. All kind of is in our wheelhouse as for our age group and stuff of seeing that being created and whatnot. So they've been able to watch it on screen. You did such a good job.
Drop just Facebook, bro.
Sick reference, Justin Timberlake. I see you. Breaking Bad, is that a top show for all four of you guys? Do y'all have something that immediately comes to mind that is the number one as for all-time TV?
Oh, geez.
Just to go off topic all the way.
No habla inglés.
I would say that definitely is one of my favorites. I think Ozark was kind of the closest feeling I got when I saw that show because it had similar vibes.
Nice.
Yep.
Back in the day, there was a few good seasons of 24 that were like amazing, and then I would say a few seasons of Dexter were up there.
The first season of Dexter is fantastic television. Completely agree. Everybody around me told me 24 was awesome, but I haven't seen that. I heard it was really good.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
I'd go The Wire and The Sopranos as my one and two.
There he is. Those are my top two. I wanted to hear somebody else say them before I jumped ahead.
I love The Wire, but to get my girl to watch it, she's like, this seems like it was made like 100 years ago. Like, where's the special? And I'm like, just watch it. It gets better. She's like, they're just doing this. I'm like, just watch it. The Wire is definitely one of my top. It's up there for sure.
It is true. There were a lot of elements of that show that with advancements in technology today, they'd have to tell the story a little differently. Yeah. But it was a great show.
It was, for sure.
For sure. Love both of the Sopranos and The Wire, two great classics. And then obviously Breaking Bad. So you're living New York, Manhattan at some point. You've definitely bounced around up there being a Knicks fan. Talk about that fandom. I know you've lived in a couple other places. I know you're on the podcast with Treaticus a long way back. So we were excited to be able to interact with you, get you here on screen with us and hang out with C&C again, man.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back. So I live in Brooklyn right now. Actually, if I look outside my window, I can see Barclays Center in the distance. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
Brooklyn.
Let's go.
It's cool to be able to go there and see inevitable Nets loss this year. It's been a pretty lackluster season for them. But yeah, no, I would say my first Knicks memories date back probably to I would say maybe the Latrell Sprewell trade was like the most visceral first memory of. I remember the story, obviously, of him choking PJ Carlesimo, and it just being such a conversation in the newspapers, on TV. Like, should the Knicks have given up any assets to get Latrell Sprewell, let alone John Starks, who was a fan favorite at the time?
Can you imagine social media at the time around the choke and whatnot? Like, that just would have been such a viral moment.
Yeah. Back then, the only thing going off were pagers. Like, did you see this? Call me.
That's right. Yeah, it was Peter Vessi's news du jour was the equivalent of the Woj bomb back then. And yeah, I mean, it was Latrell Sprewell. I think people forget, and especially in today's NBA, he would have been a superstar, capital S superstar. He finished All NBA first team in 1993, which no small feat, right? That means you're a top 2 wing in the league that year. And elite defender, good shooter, incredible athleticism. Like, I don't know if there's really a guy in the league today that I guess Kawhi would probably be the closest, but kind of like a Spurs Kawhi rather than a Clippers Kawhi, a little more athletic, a little faster.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, well, he had a chip on his shoulder too. He played with an aggressiveness, which I don't think a lot of players really play with today.
Yeah, absolutely. And him and Allen Houston, I mean, that was just such a fun Knicks team. I caught the tail end of the Ewing days, and I remember Ewing kind of breaking his wrist and that being such a big kind of story. And then, of course, Marcus Camby came right in and kind of helped propel the Knicks to the finals that year. And that's kind of the origins of Bill Simmons's the Ewing theory, where your team is actually maybe better without the best player on it in certain circumstances. But no, those were obviously very fun teams, very fun years to be a Knicks fan, followed by 20 years of not very much to root for. The Stephon Marbury days were pretty fun early on because, I think when he got traded to the Knicks, he was putting up like 23-11 or 23-12 for Phoenix. And it was just kind of like at a time when the counting stats were all that mattered. And, the value of the assist kind of went a long way there. And shortly thereafter, he came out with the Starberry shoe. I'm sure, Glenn, you remember the Starberries. I'm sure. Mm-hmm. I don't know how far they made it across the country, but the $15 shoes that you could get at Stephen Barry's.
We had a big one down here in a big mall close to us, King Brett and Grapevine, and they definitely had a huge store. A lot of people were buying the shoes and all types of clothes. I thought it was really cool there for a while. I can't believe it didn't make it.
Then there was, I think, in 2005, I want to say it was 05, so I will. It was Isaiah Thomas as the center. He was obviously the president of the team or the GM of the team at the time. And it was like Stephon Marbury, Eddie Curry, I want to say Quentin Richardson. It was just like they were trying to make the Knicks a relevant team, and it was just doomed from the start. They were projected to be a top 3 seed in the East. Didn't work out that way. But there was a lot of, Glenn, you'll remember this. There was a lot of Eddie Curry is the savior of our franchise buzz, and it just didn't work out as such.
No, I agree. I think there was all this. They were trying to grasp onto something, but it just never worked out with the combination of players they had. Remember when they had Jamal Crawford and Zach Randolph? That was kind of a fun team. Wasn't terrible. The lowest point of the Knicks for me was Howard Eisley and Shandon Anderson backcourt. And I know I've talked about that on the podcast before. I hated both those players, especially Eisley. He was so bad. He was so unathletic and slow, and he was fumbling around. Like I couldn't, man.
Tell me how you really feel, Glenn. Don't hold back.
I think Moochie Norris also shared that backcourt. I think he was their 7th or 8th man off that bench. Yeah, that was a low point. I don't think anything got lower than the Travis Ware, Mario Hezonja, Alexis Shved days, though. That was a particularly abominable team. So we can be here for the next 5 hours talking, just naming random Knicks.
I was going to say, we could let this keep going. Let's fast forward to the current bad boy Knicks right now and talk a little bit about Jalen Brunson, which we have in common. We talk about him all the time. Love to hear your take on how he's doing there. And then we've also had another recent trade that I believe you kind of predicted on Tandy's podcast, saying that there was some unhappiness with agents and people making changes. Talk a little bit about the current Knicks and their situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the most excited I've been since definitely at least 2012, 2013, when we had those kind of the geriatrics that were Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin, Marcus Camby. That was like a great team that kind of gets lost in history because Roy Hibbert just dominated that series against Carmelo and J.R. Smith. But these Knicks, I think Jalen Brunson's our best player and has probably our best player.
You're welcome.
Maybe since the Ewing days, just if you go by efficiency and just how kind of consistent they are. Obviously, Carmelo had a great run in New York in that 2012 season in particular. I believe he finished 3rd in MVP and led the league in scoring. So I don't mean to discredit Carmelo at all. I do think Jalen's got a little bit more of that like leadership vibe in the locker room that the team really
100%.
gravitates toward him. So it's been awesome. And the conversation about 1A, 1B, I think Jalen Brunson's a very misunderstood player by most of the league in that because he is such a good leader and he's the son of a point guard, obviously came into the league as a point guard with a pedigree of winning national championships as a point guard. He is very much a scorer, much closer to Luka Doncic or James Harden in skill set than, say, a Chris Paul. And I think people kind of conflate Jalen Brunson to be more of a true point guard than he really is. So,
which is why in Dallas, we kind of thought and saw that it wasn't working because they were too similar of players, Luka and Jalen. He definitely isn't a pass first point guard like your Twitter bio says you are. He definitely likes to look to score first. His pivots in the lane and faking around with the left hand scoops and fadeaways. He likes to attack. And then once you start stopping that, he just drops dimes everywhere. He's a great facilitator, but I think he likes to score.
Yeah,
definitely. He's I think what makes it work now, especially without RJ kind of gumming it up, is you got OG in the corner. When Mitch is healthy, you've got arguably the best pick and roll big in the entire NBA these days. I would say he's probably objectively behind a few names out there. Anthony Davis comes to mind, but Mitch has been phenomenal this season. And then Julius Randle, I think if you look at kind of his shot chart over the past 2 months, he's really turned a corner against the Magic last week, notwithstanding. He is taking a lot less 3-pointers. He's driving to the hoop. He's drawing fouls. I I know he recently started training with a new kind of performance coach who kind of outlined that of his last 1,800 shots or so, about 1,600 of them came as qualified contested shots. So I think that was like by far the most, the highest percentage of contested shots in the NBA. Yeah. And I believe they have kind of really had him now value putting his shoulder into people, really creating some separation and not settling for the first shot that he finds on, the shot clock, but rather driving to the hoop. So I'm excited. I think we are a piece or two away. I don't really want us to go all in to get Malcolm Brogdon or, one of these other names that's been coming up, Jordan Clarkson. Like, if we were to make a trade, I wouldn't mind going for something really low stakes, like bringing back Alec Burks. I was always a fan of him when he was with the Knicks. I can't imagine that would cost us more than Fournier and a second rounder. But I think the move, if you're the Knicks, and I don't think this is a super novel point, is inevitably this playoffs between, I'll just name a few teams, between Philly, Minnesota, Dallas, Phoenix. Some team is going to disappoint, and their superstar player is going to be really disappointed, and they're going to want out. And that's where the Knicks should kind of stack their chips and be ready for that opportunity rather than trying to rush to become a contender this year. Because I think we have the ingredients. We're going to have to pay OG. We have Brunson and Randall on cheap deals going into next season. So this is the summer to make the move. I was going to say either Kawhi or Paul George seemed attractive, but now those guys are seemingly going to be locked up for a bit. But long story short, I think this season's the season to continue that positioning to be a very attractive destination. And it also gives us one more postseason to see if Julius Randle has really turned it around or whether he's going to regress back to his old kind of ways come playoff time, because he's never really been a great playoff performer. So there's a lot of value in waiting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the roster now. I think getting rid of Barrett, like you kind of alluded to, is a huge thing because they don't need 3 one-on-one guys. And also when Brunson goes one-on-one, he's a very willing passer, and so is Randall. So if they do get shut off, they can usually make the right pass. I do think they need a little more star power. I don't know where that comes in. I actually like their bench. I don't know that they need Burks. I mean, if you think they need more scoring off the bench, maybe. I really like the way Deuce has looked. I don't think they need a Brogdon at all. They don't need like an overpaid, slower, older guy. So I'm fine with Deuce being the backup.
You can hire me if you do. More than happy.
But no, I think they're in a good spot. They're going to win some games. I don't know how competitive they'll be. If there's an opportunity to get, much better, they should do it. What do you think about DeJounte Murray being added? Do you think that's a good move?
Ooh.
Nah, I think it would be a terrible move. I don't know how you can look at Atlanta with Trae Young and DeJounte and say, ooh, I think we could do better than that. Like it's just not meant to succeed. DeJounte is an incredible floor raiser. I can name 5 teams around the league that would really benefit from having him. I think San Antonio getting him back would be interesting. I think Brooklyn would benefit from having him. But for a team that already has their primary ball handler, he is not the guy you want to kind of bring into the fold.
Yeah, and I don't want Kawhi or Paul George only because their age, their injury history. I think they should be more patient and maybe try to find someone else. But I can see how they could be like a 1 or 2 year rental. But I think they both missed so many games.
Well, I'll throw 2 names out there. It's all contingent on a little bit of a amended fence here between Leon Rose and Rich Paul, but there are 2 superstars in LA that could be kind of interesting with the Knicks. LeBron, Anthony Davis. I think AD is probably a more logical fit. I think he's expressed interest in playing in New York in the past, and you put him next to a Mitchell Robinson, and I think that's and OG. It's kind of guaranteed to be the best defense in the entire NBA season after season. So there's another team where if there's a flame out in the playoffs, that could be interesting. And I'm not really super excited about the prospects of bringing in a Donovan Mitchell or a Karl Anthony Towns, but those could be interesting as well.
We talked about this previously, how New York is a destination that everybody wants to play at the Garden, same as LA. Those are two just hubs that will always be good at recruiting NBA players. And people always want to play there. It's just such a good thing. You can hear your GM, general manager, coming out, and I've definitely heard you speak a lot of your NBA Live and 2K background of how you could talk like this for forever. But I haven't heard you talk too much about your scouting background. You were a scout in a previous life, and I think that's actually how you heard about Top Shot. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I scouted with draftexpress.com for, I want to say, 3 years, and then I did some private consulting for a couple teams overseas and a couple coaches domestically. A guy that was former Big East coach and was auditioning to become a FIBA coach for a country overseas, working on kind of putting packages together for him to kind of present in his interviews. Did the same for a few assistant coaches in the NBA. But yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I think I came of age at like a perfect time where analytics were finally starting to get embraced by coaches, but at the time it wasn't as easy to find like obvious tracking stats and to interpret those tracking stats. So this was at a time when Synergy Sports was the primary kind of data platform in the entire for any scout, any coach. So I would just kind of identify trends and help point those out. But for Draft Express more specifically, it was a very specific role of I would get a list of 6, 7, 8 guys and basically told, hey, learn everything there is to know about these guys. Get to understand their playing styles. Read all the articles you can about like how they conduct themselves in interviews, what their background is from a family perspective, all that good stuff. And on occasion, especially when the players were Northeast region, I was able to go to games and talk to them. When Dragan Bender was a top pick for the Suns that season before, Maccabi Tel Aviv was playing in Madison Square Garden, so I got to sit courtside and kind of scout him there. But I'd say the best player that I had like primary lead scouting on was probably Alex Caruso. He was a guy that really popped off the page immediately, and I thought that I was kind of falling in love with my own kind of perspective, but I think everything kind of bore itself out that he was an elite defender. He had elite athleticism. He was as smart a player as anyone I'd seen and just was a natural fit to be a role player in the NBA. Meanwhile, there were other guys that had way more accolades and attention. Bryce Johnson stands out. I think he won Player of the Year for North Carolina, and he went in the first round. And even then, I was a little confused of what exactly he was going to do in the NBA. He seemed kind of like a dime a dozen talent of really freakish athlete, but beyond that, offensive oriented big men that don't really protect the rim, haven't fared super well unless they're, really bulky, like a Jonas Valanciunas type. And he wasn't that. So yeah, long story short, got to scout a lot, got to travel a lot, and learned a lot about the NBA that way. And back
That's
to your
so cool. It's advanced a ton, like you said, with the analytics. But my dad was a basketball coach as well, and I saw him go from the old VHS with a remote that had a cord on it that he was, clipping up tapes and things to all the way having the digital clips sent, over a Google Cloud. It's just crazy how things have advanced as for cutting the games up, much less doing full profiles on guys like you're saying.
That was like Eric Spoelstra's first job with the Heat, like tagging plays so that it would put it into, eventually digitize and become easy to track. Oh, I want to see, like it got to a point, and it's only advanced since, where I mentioned Alec Burks earlier on the show. Well, what did I like about Alec Burks? What do I like about Alec Burks? He's a very different player today than he was back then, but I think among guards, he was only behind Jimmy Butler in terms of field goal percentage off of post-ups, and he averaged 6 or 7 free throws a game. So he was a very unique player where Didn't get much fanfare, shot about 39% from deep, got to the free throw line, shot 85% from the free throw line. It was just like a perfect kind of sixth man in terms of how to play efficiencies.
Right.
And Jimmy Butler, you saw when he peaked, when he had that huge kind of jump in Chicago, like what was that attributed to? It was just all about changing his shot profile. So Synergy Sports really helped outline, well, last season, 34% of his buckets came on drives. This season, 46% are coming on drive. It's just kind of helps outline exactly what's changing. And if you have any kind of attention to detail, you can really glean some interesting takeaways.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too because there's so many players that are drafted very high, even as high as first, second, third round picks or picks overall, and they end up fizzling out or not even getting to their second contract. So I think as much as you look at a player, you can do all the homework you want, and it's very important because you can see things. But until you know really what's inside that person or how they'll react to traveling around without their family or getting caught up in the things that go along with being famous, I think it's really hard to predict who's going to be awesome and who's not. And if you go down the list of even first overall picks, I mean, how many have been busts? And they're supposed to be can't miss players, right? At the time.
Well, certainly second overall picks have a reputation for busting. First, I think you have a few guys like the Andrew Wigginses of the world who haven't lived up to expectations, but have certainly done just fine for themselves in terms of career earnings and accolades. I would actually say, Glenn, to your point, that is all valid. I think that especially in the last, maybe since COVID, there's been a newfound appreciation for fit and situation. And like, I'll use Jaden Ivey as a great example here, right? Yeah. Got drafted into Detroit. I think at this point, people might think of him as on the verge of potentially being a bust. He can't really shoot. He hasn't shown many signs of progress in his season and a half in the NBA. But if you were to put Jaden Ivey on, let's just call it the Spurs, like a team that needs a point guard, like I think it's very possible that we'd be telling a very different story of just how athletic and impressive and dominant he is in kind of the full court. So
it's a pretty tough situation he's in currently.
Exactly. Yeah. It happens so often where a player gets written off or it doesn't work out for a player. And it's primarily because the fit didn't work out. Like Glenn, to what we were talking about earlier with Zach Randolph, when he was on the Knicks, he was playing next to Eddie Curry and it was kind of like, oh, this isn't going to work. And then Zach Randolph goes on to have a borderline Hall of Fame career elsewhere because he finds a center that really works for him with Marc Gasol. So, It's all, there's one basketball and there's always been this kind of temptation in the NBA to just acquire as many superstars as you can. I think that's why the Lakers ended up getting Russ Westbrook a couple years ago. But at the end of the day, if there's only one basketball, what's more important than the most talent is the best fit. So we're increasingly seeing that.
Yeah, like the guys that fit a specific role. If they do one thing really well, they can play pretty much anywhere. But the guys that try to do more and they want to lead the team and carry the ball more and all that, they might not have the success everywhere. Right.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's like, to use like a rough corollary here, it's kind of like Tyler Hansbrough and Danny Green, right? Two very different players. And maybe we can use Ty Lawson if we don't want to use Hansbrough because the reasons he didn't work out in the NBA might be a little different.
All the C&C listeners are just Googling NBA names left and right while Jacob's talking.
So Tyler Hansbrough, Player of the Year, won, I think was kind of like the Christian Laettner of UNC, like just a huge superstar for 3 or 4 years there. And he got drafted in the lottery to the Pacers. And he was an energy big man. He wasn't bad. Like he had a solid 4 or 5 years in the NBA as probably the 8th or 9th man on that team. But he was a superstar in college. Yep. And he probably put up, I want to say like 22 and 10 a game, just every night going in, dominating. Danny Green was literally the 4th best player on that team. It was Tyler Hansbrough, Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington, and then Danny Green. But who had the best career of those 4? It was by far Danny Green, because he was the most acclimated to being a role player from the get-go, because he learned it at UNC. He knew how to be the 4th best player on his team. So when he came to the NBA, they just said stand in the corner and shoot threes and defend at a high level. And he's like, got it. I know exactly how to do that.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of the trade-off you got.
It's a big step going from high school to college, because usually you're the best player on your high school team to make the college team. And now you're in a mix with all of those type of people. And the same obviously goes if you're the best college player, probably in your conference, then you went to the NBA and now you're around all similar like people. So I bet that's pretty tough. That's a great point of already having that mindset and ready to be the third or fourth guy. Was much ready to handle that type of situation.
Yep.
Just to circle back, I asked you about scouting and that you learned about Top Shot there. There may be nothing there, but how did you learn about it while you were scouting?
Yeah, so I was scouting, and then years later, a guy that I scouted with, who is now an assistant coach overseas, he sent me a DM with a link to Top Shot, and he said, it looks like they're hiring for a community guy. Have you heard of this at all? And I hadn't. This was summer of 2020.
Wow.
And I looked into it. I was intrigued. I bought a pack that day. I got a really good pull in the pack, and I was kind of hooked immediately. And then at the same time, I had sent in my application and started talking with the team. And
let's not gloss over that. You got the number one serial of the Western Conference Final, Jokic, correct?
That's right. That's right.
In your first pack ever?
First pack ever, Jokic, number one serial.
And it was the same day you were looking to buy a pack. Well, I wanted my first pack. It took me a month to get it.
That's right.
Figure it out for a long time in the start of 2021. So that's really cool.
Man, lace them up in the end of 2020. Those sat on the shelves for, I want to say, 6 or 7 days, $230 a pack. And you could just show up and buy as many as you wanted.
Yeah,
I've heard that from several people that were there in 2020, that there was just some supply and they were people were emailing, like your buddy sent to you, trying to find other people that would be interested in it, that these things were there. We were just a little bit behind you, but having fun still. So very glad that you jumped in there. You've been such a valuable part of the community. There's the sirens. I've been waiting on them in every podcast I've heard you with Treaticus or Tandy. There's always either construction or
I thought they were coming for me. I was about to run.
Brooklyn for you.
Yeah, it's a little snowy out. I thought we were going to get a quiet morning, but never a quiet morning over here.
Well, speaking of that, I'll jump into one segment that we do regularly was the Sticky Icky Wiki. It's a small one, and it's probably for just those of us that are not from New York and up that way. We've all been very intrigued with the Bing Bong meme and GIF, and the opening day in 2021 in October 21st, there was a video that went viral. That there was lots of people on the streets going nuts after the win with the Bing Bong. And I had no idea where that really came from. I just thought somebody maybe started it, and then it's gone viral, which is actually what happened. But there's actually a cool reference. Do either of you two New Yorkers know where it's from?
Of course.
Yeah, I always thought it was ping pong until I found out later. I'm like, are they trying to get a game in? Like, I don't understand.
So there's a show called Side Talk. That's two NYU graduates that are young guys on the street doing interviews and whatnot. And they've expanded and grown a pretty cool show. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob or Glenn. And the start of their show, mimicking, I guess, the sound of the New York City subway is
dun,
Bing Bong.
Dun, dun. Yep,
And
exactly.
so they say it a bunch on the show, and then a lot of people they're interviewing on Coney Island were dropping it, which is where you get the guys with the hard hats and the and the dogs. But really funny, and I just had to express that in case anybody else didn't know where Bing Bong came from. That is the New York City subway and Side Talk. Pretty cool.
Yeah, there was a great commercial when the Robert Pattinson The Batman was coming out, and it was like a spoof on where's the origin of Bing Bong? Why do they say Bing Bong? And it's like Batman agonizing over why do they keep on saying Bing Bong? And it like eventually shot to the locker room at MSG where RJ Barrett's kind of sitting there. He's like, relax, man. It's just the sound of the train.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea. That definitely went viral on Nick's Twitter, X, and Mike Breen even dropped it. I think Evan Fournier jumped on there, as you previously mentioned him. But it was a pretty funny thing that went around there for a while, and we definitely noticed it from the outside, but just didn't know the origin. So I wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, you can see how desperate New York fans are just to have something to feel great about. I mean, that was a few years ago, but that was what was it an overtime win over Boston?
Yes,
yep,
sir.
Exactly.
But that was just like the first game of the season. Everyone's going nuts because they're just so excited. They just want to win so bad because it's been so long.
Well, it was off the back of we lost to the Hawks in the playoffs the year before, but things were looking up. And the one thing we felt we really needed in that Hawks series was a secondary creator to kind of help alleviate the role that Julius Randle had. And we brought in Fournier to play that role, and he had an electric game. The Fresh Threads Fournier Knicks moment is that game. And I want to say
7 or 8 threes?
Exactly. So the crowd's going wild after the game, after beating our most heated rival Celtics. It just felt like we had a real team that year. We were going to actually be legit, and wheels came off very quickly thereafter.
Bing bong.
Yeah. I gotta ask Jacob.
Shoot.
Which player overall would you choose between New York Carmelo or New York Randle? Just overall, who's been better for the team?
I think Carmelo. You kind of gotta go Carmelo. Granted, I think Randle's been criminally underrated by fans. I think there was a stat that Randle and Larry Bird are the only two players ever to go 20-10-5 on 40% from deep, right? Those things are a real testament to just how much better he's gotten in his time in New York. But there was just something about Carmelo that was really, really clutch, really fun to watch. And he could create his own shot against any defender. And, I think there are receipts. Carmelo, as our best player, went head-to-head against Chicago on multiple occasions and took down Chicago, and he went head-to-head against the Heat. And there was that great game when they had first acquired him. Glenn, I'm sure you'll remember. We first acquired Carmelo and Chauncey Billups, and Amari has this kind of chase down block against LeBron at the very end of a game in Miami, and it just felt like we had arrived. So I would go Carmelo on that one. But once you bring Brunson into the conversation, it's a little harder.
Yeah, it's funny. I would actually argue Randle.
So you still got time to judge that one for him to keep playing.
I think Randle's a much more willing passer. And
That's true.
He just gets a bad rap because he gets emotional and sometimes the wheels fall off in certain games. But I think overall he's pretty consistent.
Yeah, I wish he took 10% off of his passes. He is a willing passer, but sometimes they just zip right into the second row.
Yeah.
We definitely noticed Randle, now that we're talking about him, being a little bit more focused and playing harder on both ends of the floor. And I think that is to your previous statement about Brunson's leadership in the locker room, on the floor. He's definitely got the team playing as a unit. We saw it up close in Dallas, and some of that is Luka and some other things, but it was quietly Jalen, and he's definitely the glue guy for sure.
He is he's so New York. It's very Jeter-esque. I don't use that word lightly, but it's a guy that is bound to get scrutinized by the other 28 markets around the NBA of just how he's not good and he's overrated and not as good as people are making him out to be, but he'll be the captain of the team that keeps on winning, and we'll take it every time.
Absolutely.
For sure. Well, want to get to like an old school stump the Schwab. We'll go to Throwback ESPN. Test your fandom a little bit. Glenn, you want to tell them about this game we've been playing?
Yeah, so we just looked up 3 former Knicks players. I have zero doubt that you're going to get all 3 very easily. Like I said, with all the names you were dropping earlier that I had to think about even for a second. I should have went really hard, but I went fairly difficult. But I I think you'll be fine. You just have to name the player based on a picture.
Name that player.
Yeah. Next time we have him on, we'll have to go just really tough. Just start of the franchise.
I'm going to go back to 1950s, black and white, Oscar Schechtman coming in.
Oh, man.
First basket of the NBA.
All right. Number 1, name that player. No hits, everybody.
Mr. Rick.
There
Mr. Rick Brunson.
Yeah, a lot of name drops earlier. You even mentioned that he played in the NBA, talking about Jalen. I knew that was going to be easy.
He's a little rounder these days, but
just a bit.
Yeah, I remember watching Knicks games with Rick Brunson as our backup point guard. He and Chris Childs were kind of duking it out to back up Charlie Ward for a season there. Chris Childs was my favorite, so I was never the biggest Rick Brunson guy because I love.
He wasn't that great of a player. Let's be honest. I mean, he was okay, but
Tom Thibodeau said something along the lines of when Jalen went for 50 a couple months back. He said, "You had a better night tonight than your dad had in his entire career."
Yeah.
We could feel that trade kind of happening before it happened. As for Rick joining the Knicks coaching staff, the whole staff came down to Dallas and watched a game, sitting in the arena in Dallas. There was lots of signs on the way that were like, this isn't going to end well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, like I said,
he wanted his own team and he got it.
All right, number 2, name that player.
Jerome James.
Yep.
Look,
Do you remember this guy had one good playoff series? He was on the Sonics. He had one good series where he probably averaged like 20 and 10. And then I think it was Isaiah Thomas that signed him to some big contract the very next summer.
5 years, $30 million, if I recall correctly.
Right, Isaiah Thomas.
And he was terrible, and he was always injured, right?
Yeah, it's another conversation about fit. I think like these guys, I think he did join a team that, like we signed him, but I believe we had Dikembe Mutombo at the time as well. So it's kind of like, why are we bringing on 2 guys that are eerily similar? Like with a guy like Jerome James, I think he had a good playoff series with Seattle because there was no one in the lane to kind of block him, right? I think that team it was kind of a little bit of a modern team in the sense that Ray Allen and Rashard Lewis were their top 2 guys. So the paint was wide open for him. And he wasn't inherently bad. It was just an overpay for a guy, to your point, who got hurt all the time and probably didn't fit in well with the other teammates.
One good series. You're like, oh, he's our guy.
That's all it takes sometimes.
Well, that's the Bismack Biyombo. Biyombo got like 4 years, $80 million from the Magic because he had 26 rebounds in a game for the Raptors against the Cavs in the playoffs. So this stuff happens all the time, especially with big men because the playoffs are where centers really shine.
Poor Biyombo. He's just sitting at home, having his coffee and breakfast, and then sees on the C&C podcast he's getting dragged through the mud.
We could use him on New York. I think he'd be a decent third-string center until we get Mitch Robinson back.
We got to get Sims off the bench once in a while. What the heck's going on with that? Like, give him 10 minutes at least.
Yeah, I think Biyombo might be better than Sims. I hate to say it because I am a Sims guy. But, that Jerome James was a good one. That was a stumper.
Yeah. And the final piece should be an easy one based on those first 2.
Yes.
Name that player.
My favorite, Mr. Landry, GM of the Atlanta Hawks right now.
There you go.
For those watching, one of the moments I want most to come to Top Shot at some point is Landry Fields had this incredible knack for chasing down missed free throws and kind of putting them back. So he would stand behind the 3-point line. His teammate would shoot a free throw. It would rim out. He would catch it in one fell swoop and put it back, kind of Julius Erving-esque. So big fan of Landry, and unfortunately he got injured a little early in his career, but he could have had a nice 10-15 year run there as just a really solid 3-and-D option.
He was one of the best players on our team for a while, just to show you how low we were.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
I think at the time we probably could have traded him instead of Wilson Chandler in the Carmelo trade, or maybe him instead of Danilo Gallinari, one of the two. But he was fitting in so well with the Amari Raymond Felton roster early in that season that we valued him too much to put him in that trade. But in hindsight, he was not a good fit next to Carmelo, and we probably would have been better off keeping Wilson Chandler instead.
Yeah.
So this is funny because this entire podcast so far, we've talked so much basketball, and I can't tell you that how much that's happening in our C&C chat on the Discord and the Twitter chat as a group with Fast Break and everything that's happening on NBA Top Shot. We are so focused on basketball and watching and talking players and just having a great time with our buddies. We're having a blast with all that you guys have going on the platform. You say it, and we've all said it several times, that things are moving so fast. But if we back up for a second and we think about all the things that have been added, I mean, what an incredible advancement we've had in the past year, 2 years. Like, so much has been added, and just a really cool experience we're all having on NBA Top Shot.
Yeah, I think this has been our best season to date in terms of just like laying out a plan, establishing a foundation, leaning into what makes sense from a collector standpoint, and creating kind of a system, a closed system that really fits well together. So every week, obviously, when we have that pack drop announcement, we also have burn leaderboards, then we have locking challenges, we have expert challenges off of those locking challenges. It all fits really nicely together. Fast Break is kind of the new layer to the equation that we're integrating and going to continue to iterate and tinker with until it gets to a point where it's really kind of not just fun for our community, but also benefiting the collecting experience as well. So we're really excited. We know we have a lot of work to do, but things are moving in the right direction, I'd say.
Dude, you just said collecting experience. Let's bring that back. Let's talk about a long time ago, possibly. When you think back about, like, you know, little Jacob out there just balling pass first, right? Like, what's a basketball memory experience? First game, first time you hit that shot over someone. Like, bring us back to a memory that you just can't forget involving basketball. Like, what is that for you?
As a fan, I would say the memory that kind of stands out, there are a bunch, but Larry Johnson's 4-point play in the Garden, definitely up there. And then as far as a game I went to, that may have been the most fun. Yeah, Grandmama, exactly. Yeah. The game that may have been the most fun to attend was T-Mac's debut with the Knicks. It was a very uneventful career with the Knicks, but he had one game.
But that game,
it was they were going up against a young Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and the Thunder, and T-Mac turned back the clock for that night and I think dropped 26 points off the back of not playing all season. And he just he really was such a talent. I can't understate that enough. He was so good. If he wanted to, like in today's NBA, he was like, it's hard to, the closest is LeBron. Like, there's no one in the league today that played T-Mac style of like just visionary point guard, but also dominant athlete, overpowering, incredible scorer, great shooter.
So stronger Penny Hardaway.
Yeah, a little bit of that. More athletic than Penny too, right?
The fact that him and Vince were cousins just blew my mind. I didn't understand. I was like, how good are these guys? Like, that's so unfair.
It blew their minds too. I don't know if you've seen that story of them finding out.
Yeah, they didn't even know.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
And then from a playing standpoint, my senior year of college, my friends and I would play every single day at the kind of rec center on campus. And I was always like, I was never particularly good, but I had a good court vision, and I did like to make a flashy pass. It was a little
you did.
Milos Teodosic-esque, where like the substance isn't necessarily there, but there's a lot of sizzle on the steak, and it looks fun.
Extra spicy.
So I had one play I remember where I knew there was a guy behind me, and I wanted to start the break. So I ran probably to right around half court off an outlet, and I called for it, and the big man threw it to me. And in one fell swoop, I kind of just like volleyballed it over my head, and it went just luckily right to my teammate.
Let's go.
It got some nice fanfare from the crowd. So that was probably the highlight. That was the one where if you had a camera watching all those games, it's like, oh, that guy's actually good, which wasn't really the case. But every few games, I had a nice play like that. I also I fell in love with the Rondo fake behind the back pass to the layup.
Yep.
That was big there for a while, for sure.
Yeah, it was.
So I did that against a player on the Emory team, and that was my like welcome to the big leagues moment. Where if I was able to do it against a D3 guy, I must have for a minute there actually been solid.
Jacob getting the oohs and ahs. I love it.
Very cool. I think it's awesome, Jacob, that you joined us today. You know, I remember first joining Top Shot, and you were in all the videos, and you're like the face of the Top Shot for a little bit, doing all the communications. And it's just awesome that, like, you know, you're on our show today. So I want to say thanks for coming on.
I've been a fan of your guys' show. I loved kind of the spirit of Collectin and Connectin, and just kind of to your point, it's all about ball, and like it's one of the more engaged and fun and positive communities around not just the NFT space, but the entire basketball landscape is better because of fans like you guys. So really appreciate you having me on, and excited to be here.
You're going to make me cry. I was going to ask 3Ball where they can find us if they want to listen, but such kind words, Jacob.
Love it, man. That is so nice of you to say.
Not going to cry.
Yeah, keep it together, King Brett. King Brett's alluding that we are on Discord, Twitter, here on YouTube if you're watching, and as well as on Instagram. We're definitely having fun and the good vibes that Jacob mentioned, but just cool to even be recognized by you and the Top Shot crew. You just said it right there. We've talked about it previously with Brandon and Austin and Pac Rip, formerly pushing the basketball, and it seems that Top Shot's doing that, and we're doing it at C&C. So it's a lot of fun to just hang out and talk basketball with our friends and watch it every night.
Awesome. Well, amen to that, and looking forward to keeping up with as the trade deadline comes and seeing what these teams do. I think Dallas is prone to make a move. Maybe the Knicks will make another small one around the edges. It's going to be fun.
With each other.
Yeah, that's right. Can't wait.
We'll take Luka if it's okay.
Yeah. I bet you will.
Can't wait to take Luka and Derek Lively for Fournier, and I guess you guys can have Randall back. You'll need some usage.
All right, you're so smart. We should totally do that. I'll call Mark Cuban right now. Let me just hit him up.
Declining those offers, no counter offer.
Love it. Dude, Jacob, thanks so much for being on 3Ball, Glenn. Freaking episode 31 of Collectin and Connectin, baby. Keep coming back. I promise we will.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great one. Take care.
Yes, sir.